I think a lot of real estate investors are scared to jump in the water. You hear that analysis paralysis, and I think it's for reasons like the ones you just explained. They don't know the area very well, they're unsure of the tenant quality, and they don't want to deal with roaches on a Sunday morning. Even though all of that occurred, are you still glad you made the purchase and went through with it?
Yeah, it got me in the business.
Alright, so this was the first property you ever purchased. What was the address?
First property was 2 Dana Avenue in Albany, near downtown Albany area.
The date? How long ago was that?
That was November 23rd, 1993. I'll always remember that date.
Mm-hmm. How did you find it?
It was just on the multiple listing service, so I was pretty raw, just reading a book and running out there looking for property. So back in the 90s, it was just a matter of looking in newspapers and local realtors, just handing off listings. So I had 7 or 8 listings that I was looking at, and 2 Dana Avenue happened to be one of them. So it was a quick search because I chose to take a stab at 2 Dana Avenue, and ultimately they accepted my offer.
Okay, so you were reading this book and that made you want to look at properties?
Yeah, on the restaurant I was working at, a friend at the restaurant referred me Nothing Down for the 90s by Robert Allen. He had purchased a handful of properties that he had been working on for 4 or 5 years. Gave me that book, said it helped him out, and I read it. And it explained very simply the general concepts of investing in small rental properties, utilizing little or no money down. So as I got into that book, I immediately got more and more interested in the business, and I got right out there and looked at some properties for probably just a few weeks, and threw a low offer on 2 Dana Avenue, and they accepted it.
Okay, so you're a young guy, you read the book, you submitted an offer, they accepted it. What happened after that?
Then we were, actually, it wasn't we at this point. I was off trying to get bank financing, without having any real insight on that process. So I had probably applied to at least 3 banks who declined me. So ultimately, one of the 3 may have given me some insight on how I might be able to make this happen. So it was finding a partner. So originally, I went to my brother, who happened to end up being a partner in future deals, but on this one he declined. He didn't like the area, but I was a pretty stubborn kid, and I was going to get this done no matter what. So my best friend growing up, Greg, asked him to be a partner, and he quickly agreed. So we together applied for bank loan. I can't remember if it was with the person that gave me the insight that I needed a partner. It may have been. And that was what I needed to get us into that property.
So when you first are applying for this loan, did you have an exit strategy, or were you just looking to buy a property?
No, the book was more geared towards buy and hold. It was buy a property once a year for 10 years, and ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it was small ball. But at the time, it seemed long ball to me. Where you buy 1-2 family once a year for 10 years, and in that 10-year period of time, it calculated out how you could become a millionaire just by buying one property a year for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, it certainly didn't work out that systematically. We did that for the first 2 years. One property in 93, another property in 94, and then in 1995 we built a little more momentum and started buying multiple properties per year.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you learned a lot from your first property. Are there any specific lessons that stand out?
Yes. Don't buy in a war zone. So, there's pros and cons to it. It was, something that was difficult to manage, especially when it was the first property. So, those properties don't appreciate as good as properties in more stable areas. So it takes a little while to get the positive effects of real estate, which is good cash flow and good appreciation rates. The cash flow is a little bit more difficult on those properties because it becomes so uncertain. On paper, those types of properties appear to make good money on a monthly basis, but they're harder to manage. So to reach those on paper goals becomes difficult when tenants in these neighborhoods sometimes fall behind on rent, sometimes leave you neglected apartments once they move out, which add to your expenses and can really make those cash flow projections very difficult to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And you managed this one yourself?
Yeah, me and my partner managed it ourselves. We managed this and all our other properties for the next many years. So the difficult part of managing these properties is it's the hardest asset to manage when you have such a challenging tenant. The great side of it was we learned a lot by dealing with such a challenging property to manage in the first years. So it allowed us to manage the next properties in the upcoming years much easier based on what we had learned on the first one.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything you do differently about it from what you've learned since then?
Yeah, ultimately that we changed our whole approach. So the further we got into our careers, the more and more we understood how location is so key. That's what everybody says, in any book. Mm-hmm. Location. That's not a secret in the real estate investing world. But also quality buildings, well-built buildings, good floor plans so you could attract good tenants. So as you continue to grow in the business, you continue to, elevate, the quality of your purchases because those buildings appreciate really well. The rents go up at a higher rate. They attract good tenants that are easier to manage, and it allows just the general ease of management, especially when you've accumulated a pretty good portfolio. It's so key to have properties that are easier to manage when you're managing on a high volume.
Mm-hmm. So you're just starting out, you didn't know a lot about the industry, and it wasn't the best area. Were you able to make it work? Did it cash flow and eventually pay off?
Yeah, it worked well. For the first year and a half, 2 years, we had the same tenants at the original purchase. So it cash flowed okay. We had to work for it, late payments from tenants, stuff like that, but everything came together. So it didn't become a cash flow challenge until the first tenant falls behind on rent, moves out, leaves the apartment in bad condition. At that point, you have to, put money into the apartment to turn it over and get it prepared for the next tenant. So, you take 2 steps forward with cash flow, you accumulate a certain amount of money over a year and a half, and then you spend it preparing it for the next tenant. So that's where it's so key to, getting that good tenant so you don't have that big turnover expense giving away all the cash flow that you just accumulated over the last year.
So that was your first ever experience with turnover as a landlord and a property manager. Were you prepared for it, or did it kind of overwhelm you, all the work that needed to be done?
I can laugh for a while about that. It brings back certain memories. No, I wasn't ready for it. It was absolute culture shock to walk in. And this was probably the first several tenants at that address. Once they moved out, it seemed to be the same thing over and over again, where, they seemed to intentionally leave as big of a mess as they could. Every room, just debris, clothes, miscellaneous items scattered about, total mess, bathrooms, kitchens unclean. I'm not sure if it was the first tenant or, a couple after that, within that first few years, where, I was using the Home Depot roach spray. Once I saw it, it's the first time I ever saw roaches. I'm so grateful that I grew up in a middle class neighborhood and had a certain quality of life. So, but to go from the front room spraying roaches that I had been seeing, and then working my way from front to back, thinking that I was doing some degree of extermination. So once I got to the back of the building, I went back towards where I started, and to see that this spray that I just sprayed all throughout the walls and the perimeter of the interior of the apartment just brought all the roaches out. So now I'm looking at just hundreds of roaches crawling all over, to the point where that was an interesting morning. My first experience with roaches and the hood.
I think a lot of real estate investors are scared to jump in the water. You hear that analysis paralysis, and I think it's for reasons like the ones you just explained. They don't know the area very well, they're unsure of the tenant quality, and they don't want to deal with roaches on a Sunday morning. Even though all of that occurred, are you still glad you made the purchase and went through with it?
Yeah, it got me in the business. And fortunately, I had a pretty good work ethic. Actually, an excellent work ethic. Along with my partner, we did what we had to do. So I had the mindset at that point, because I was warned by friends and family. I was warned about the neighborhood, but fortunately and unfortunately, being very stubborn at the time, I was going to make this purchase just because there were people saying don't do it. So I had that type of attitude, which obviously is little hard-headed, because it wasn't a purchase I should have been making at that point in time. But on the other note, I was not going to fail. So it was a 2-family building, very simple. We just had to keep this ship afloat, well enough to, pay the bills. So we had always, had it rented, and, we just managed it as good as we possibly could based on, what we were dealing with. And, over time it got better and better. We were lucky enough for this property to gentrify. Neighborhood stabilized quite a bit, which allowed us to, put money in the property to attract, a better tenant, and ultimately over the years it turned into a great property.
Okay, so you didn't let these setbacks slow you down at all. How long did it take you until you purchased your next property?
It was, the next property was October 24th of 1994, so it was 11 months later. So that first property was just literally a learning experience of, okay, we have one under our belt, but we really refined what we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately location became, top notch thought of what we had to do next. So after that first purchase, we just literally drove to the city of Albany, finding areas that we were more comfortable with. So that next deal was all about location and getting a higher quality tenant.
All right, I'm excited to hear more about it. Thanks.